So the next speaker, how many of you in this room would describe yourself as an N=1-er? You do a lot of self-experiments, you biohack, you look at every health marker known to mankind. If you follow my Instagram, you know I sometimes wear continuous glucose monitors. Who does that in here that's not a type 1? Nobody. So this next speaker, Dr. John Limansky, you saw him on a panel yesterday. He's going to talk all about those biohacking measurements and how to customize the ketogenic diet for you. So please welcome Dr. John Limansky.
Thank you, Jimmy. Big round of applause for Jimmy, Brian, Robin, and the whole Ketovangelist crew. So for those who don't know me, my name is Dr. John Limansky, and I'm a recovering physician. What I mean by that is I used to work as a hospital doctor or a hospitalist. And in my experience in Mississippi, I realized that the majority of the diseases that we see in the hospital are directly related to what we're talking about here. So poor Western diet and lifestyle. And so what I'd like to talk to you about today is how you can incorporate the biohacking into your ketogenic lifestyle to really maximize what you are specifically doing for yourself. So just to begin, full disclosures, I will talk about a few items, a few products, but I am not actually paid by those products. I just use them for illustrative purposes. So let's start. So biohacking refers to managing one's own biology using a combination of medical, nutritional, and electronic techniques. And that sounds pretty complex, but in reality, it's really not. Some people are really pushing the frontier of what biohacking is. Guys like Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, Larry Hamilton are really taking the biohacking topic and pushing it to the limit, pushing what the body can do to the limit. Other people, like athletes, are using biohacking to monitor their stress levels to see if they can recover from their activities, perform at the highest level. And people who are CEOs, entrepreneurs, business owners are using biohacking to really maximize their performance and increase their sales. So you guys all here are actually performing biohacking without even knowing it by incorporating a ketogenic lifestyle into your life. So I approach health, biohacking, nutrition from a little bit different perspective as a physician. And I look at the spectrum of health more in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. So most of us here are looking at ketogenic lifestyle for weight loss or improving our health. Some of us have metabolic diseases that we're really trying to get rid of or reverse. And that's a great first start. But as you progress, and I've been doing keto for about 10 years on myself, you really start looking at other things to improve. So I've never had a problem with weight loss per se or weight management, but I never felt good. My concentration was always bad. My energy level was bad. And I would just say, well, you know, I'm in medical school, I'm tired, I don't feel good. And then I was in residency, I really don't feel good, but I'm just working a lot. And the reality is that all this was attributed to the way that I was eating. And when we get to the end of it, we really looked at how we can have elite performance with biohacking and ketosis. So for this talk, I'm going to talk about what it is, who can practice it, how you can apply it to a ketogenic lifestyle, and how you can measure your individualized response. Because remember, we're all approaching this from a different perspective, right? What works for me may not work for you. There's so many variables that go into why you're successful. And I think we've heard a lot of that during this conference, people talking about individualized response. I like this quote by Steve Jobs because it really applies to what we're discussing here. So if you haven't found it, keep looking. Don't settle. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as the years roll on. So my wife may not agree with this, but I think it does apply to what we're talking about here. Sorry, honey. So when I look at the human body, as a doctor, as a physician, as a scientist, I look at all the variables that go into what affects whether or not you're successful or not. And biohacking really focuses on a lot of these different variables. So genetics has been talked about, epigenetics, even things like oxygen. So the type of oxygen you breathe, how you breathe it affects your body. Whether or not you exercise, what type of exercise affects it. whether or not you do meditation. Sleep has a huge effect. So some of you might notice that I'm wearing my man ring, my bling. Jimmy's wearing one also. And what we're trying to track is our sleep, as well as something called HRV. And if you look at my sleep pattern, so in my former life, a long time ago, my sleep pattern was horrible. I would work 130 hours a week. I would work 36-hour shifts. And when I would come home, number one, my wife was not happy to see me because I was in a bad mood. But number two, I would want to eat everything around because what happened? My cortisol level was up, my insulin level was up, my stress hormones were all up, my leptin was up. I couldn't control what I was eating, and that's directly related to my sleep patterns. I still now have trouble with my sleep. I do not get the deep sleep, the recovery sleep that I should get. Other things like your environment, your environmental exposure, the environment that you're in has a huge effect. Light has a huge effect. People in the Northwest who don't get light exposure and are depressed, it affects your nutrition. Your stress level, as I mentioned, your cognition. So for this talk, though, I want to focus on nutrition, and specifically how you can biohack your nutrition, incorporate it into your ketogenic diet to really maximize what you're accomplishing. So when I look at health and biohacking and ketosis, I look at it as if we're on a spectrum, right? So we all technically should start at a neutral point. Unfortunately, this is not 100% accurate because of the effects of the fetus in utero. We've shown studies that will show that you actually will have increased risk of obesity if there's gestational diabetes. As you go on through your life stressors, Western diet, Western way of living, we start getting towards the left side of the chart. Left side? Sorry, for you, right side. So you get weight loss or weight gain, premature death. And most people will approach ketogenic diet specifically to address those 2 points. They want to lose weight, or if they don't do it, they're going to die, right? That's the majority of people. And that's a very good reason to do a ketogenic diet. However, I term that more of a short-term keto. And what I mean by that is you have a wedding, you have an event you want to go to, you got to lose your 30 pounds, you want to do it within 30 days, I'm going to do it, I'm going to look great in the photos, and then I'm going to go back to my normal way of living. That's short term, that's fine, but everybody here I think is focused on the long-term keto, which means you want to go away from weight loss. Weight loss is not your main function. Brian talked about this. He wasn't interested in weight loss. It's a side effect of improving your health. So you want to improve your health, you want to reverse those metabolic diseases, you want to improve your mood, your concentration, and once you start getting to the other end of the equation, you really want to get high-level wellness. And that's really what biohacking is focusing on. Through this conference, you've noticed that many people are talking about the variable response to nutrition, right? When keto first became kind of mainstream, it was cut your carbs to less than nothing, increase your fats, do it, it's going to work for you. And what people realize is that that may work for a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily work for everybody the same way. And there's a lot of variation to why you respond differently than I would respond or to anybody else. And some of this has been discussed. So the genetics, epigenetics, polymorphisms or SNPs. Dr. Cole talked about the gut microbe, right? Very fascinating talk, and we don't even know what we don't know about the gut microbe. I still tell my patients not to send me pictures of their poop, and God bless them for doing that. Also, the quality of the food is very important, right? So you could technically go to McDonald's, get a hamburger, take the bun off, and that's keto, right? That's more of a short-term keto. You would probably lose some weight, but you're not actually improving your health because the quality of the food that you're consuming is very poor. So it's still a pro-inflammatory state. You have to look at the previous metabolic damage that you have. People who are insulin resistant or leptin resistant will tell you they have a much harder time losing weight, getting healthy, getting their markers back to where they should be. And also the hormonal responses that have been discussed. So what do most people look at when they're looking at a ketogenic lifestyle or diet? Most of us check our fasting glucose, our blood or our breath ketones, and our body weight, and that's a very good start. But what I want to show you is how you can incorporate a few other variables into your life to improve and kind of customize what you're doing. And that's really what biohacking is about. So biohacking, a little bit on the side, N of 1. So what does that mean? It means that you are doing research on yourself. You are testing yourself. Because again, we all respond differently depending on all those variables, right? So you have to figure out what's going to work for you. So show of hands, how many people here have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or some other tracking device? Okay, I'm kind of blinded, but I think about half the audience. So those people who raise their hands, how many of you actually use the data that you record? Or do you just look at your watch and say, oh, cool, I walked 15,000 steps, or my heart rate is 20 and I'm dead? Anything? No? Okay. So a group of researchers actually looked at this and they reported about it in JAMA. And there was a big uproar because what they showed was that using those technologies, the Fitbit, the Apple Watch, did not actually result in long-term weight loss. And so obviously those companies were pretty upset. But the point I want to make is that it's not necessarily having more data that's the answer, but it's having the right type of data and knowing what to do with that data and how it specifically relates to you. And so with my patients, I look at a lot of variables, but some of the measurements that I really look at, there's too many really to go into in this short period of time, but the ones I want to talk about are the 2-hour postprandial glucose test and heart rate variability. So let's start with the 2-hour postprandial glucose test. So just some basic chemistry. I know it's late, but biophysiology. So when doctors are trying to recreate diabetic management and insulin management, what do? We start with a basal insulin, a long-acting insulin, something like Lantus or Levemir, and then we add in there some short-acting insulin to try to help with the spikes when we eat foods. That's trying to reproduce what the body normally does, right? So everybody here is producing insulin, some of us much higher levels, some much lower, and we can measure that. Anytime we eat a meal, we get a spike in glucose, the insulin spikes to kind of counteract that and drive the glucose into the cells. But research has actually shown that not only is it important that you have a lower resting glucose, it's that those spikes in glucose are actually very detrimental to our health and cause a tremendous amount of damage. And so if you go to your doctor and you ask them to do a hemoglobin A1C, they're going to give you an average, right? But it's not going to represent those spikes. If you worked in Mississippi like I did, I used to see people, hemoglobin A1C, 17, 18, 19. So their glucose were always in the 400 to 500s. I hope that's not anybody here. So what influences the response that we get? Again, it's all the things that we talked about and that you've heard throughout this conference. It's the gut microbe, and we don't even know what we don't know about that. Genetics, your autoimmune system, how stressed you are, how your sleep levels are, whether or not you exercise. And a group of researchers actually looked at the question of what influences your response. And they did a study that was really eloquently done and represented in Cell. And what they did is they took 800 individuals, they fixed their meals for a week, so everybody got the same food. They outfitted them with continuous glucose monitors, and so they checked their glucose levels every minute for a week. They also did other tests, and I know this is a very busy slide, but you can probably see it better if you look on your handouts. They looked at the gut microbe, they took other blood tests, they did questionnaires, and what they found was that there was a very variable response to food. So the food is the same, the response is very different in terms of the glycemic response. The example that they use, which is pretty powerful, is somebody eats a cookie. 50% of the people respond with a massive glycemic response. 50% of the people do not. And you would think, okay, cookie, everybody should respond the same. And so what they did is then they took another 100 people to verify the results, and then they did a randomized controlled trial based on their algorithm that they patented. And based on this, they could tell what the response would be to the individual based on the food that they gave them. So they would know, if I give you a certain amount of food, I know what your response is going to be from a glycemic response, which is extremely powerful, right? And so a couple things to take away from this. Number one, It's individualized. What works for you may not work for me, may not work for somebody else. The second thing, you can go out and buy their product, which is patented, or you can just do some biohacking yourself. And so this is one of the most powerful and easiest tests I think you can use to really titrate and see what foods work for you. So how do you do this? It's very simple. What I do, because I do this on myself, is I wake up in the morning, take 5 minutes of relaxation time. I pick an item that I think may or may not be affecting me. So for most people, some people have problems with cheese. So let's take cheese, for example. So you take a piece of cheese, you ingest it. 2 hours later, you check your postprandial glucose levels. And you're looking for a response. And the number varies depending on who you ask. In my opinion, you're looking for a number less than 100. If you're insulin resistant, leptin resistant, then you're really looking for a number above or below 115. So that's a pretty simple measurement that you can do. The caveats are, I would recommend doing it at least 7 days in a row, same scenario, don't add any variability. And kind of track and see what is your response. If it's always the same, then that tells you your answer. The other thing is, you want to redo this test 3 months or 6 months down the road, because as you address those other variables, your gut health, your stress levels, those numbers can change. So let's talk about heart rate variability. So what is it, how to use it, and how to apply it to a ketogenic lifestyle. So just some basic biophysiology. We have a sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, and they're always supposedly counterbalanced, right? So sympathetic nervous system, Bear comes in this room, we all start running, you better believe our sympathetic nervous system is on overdrive, right? We want to shunt the blood to our heart, lungs, to our muscles so that we escape. What's the number one fear of most individuals? Anybody? Public speaking, thank you, yes. So, I know I sound monotone up here, but my sympathetic nervous system is on overdrive, and that's good. I want that, right? I want to be able to present. The problem with the Western society is that we never turn that off. And so we're always on overdrive. We don't sleep well. We have trouble at work. We have trouble with family. We have in-laws. We have all kinds of stressors that keep that sympathetic nervous system firing. And we can actually measure this to see what's happening in your body. So I mentioned earlier that Jimmy and I have this ring, and what are we testing besides our sleep? We're also testing our HRV, our heart rate variability. Same idea, you wake up in the morning, 5 minutes relaxation, you check it, and it tells you your overall stress level. But you can actually pinpoint certain foods based on what your HRV level is. So again, just some basic physiology, EKG or a telestrip, we're looking at the heart. And this is an electric conduit. We're looking at where the electrodes are on the chest. And based on that, we get a tracing. And we can tell a lot about this and the pathophysiology of a heart. But what I want you to focus on is this spike and this spike. This is called the R-to-R interval. And you'll notice that there's some variation in it, and that's called the heart rate variability. And this is a reflection of your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And so people have actually looked at this to see if heart rate variability can be a marker of stress. And what they found is that, indeed, it can. So what do you do with it? So you have to obtain your baseline HRV value, okay? So you can either do the Oura ring, but that tells you kind of a general idea, or you can get a heart rate monitor, but it has to be a very sensitive one, which Polar and other companies make them. Those of you with Fitbits or Apple Watches, sorry, those are not sensitive enough. So in the morning, you wake up, 5 minutes relaxation time, you take your HRV, you get a baseline. What you want to know is higher HRV means higher parasympathetic activation, and that's what we want. Lower HRV, you have a higher sympathetic nervous system activation. Your goal is to try to increase your parasympathetic nervous system, and the reflection of that is the higher number. So let's do that for a second. Parasympathetic nervous system. I want everybody in this room, I can't see you, so I hope you do this. Close your eyes, take a deep breath in through your nose, and as you're blowing out, I want you to hum through your nose. Feel like we're at a new age conference. What are you doing? You're activating your parasympathetic nervous system. You're also increasing your nitric oxide production, which is also going to increase your parasympathetic nervous system. So again, N of 1, how can you apply this to yourself? And specifically with the ketogenic diet. Remember, all these things come into play when we're looking at the human body and improving our wellness. So HRV can actually be influenced by the food content, and multiple studies have shown that you can measure your HRV and see if a food is pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. Another very interesting study looked at disinhibition in eating. So imagine you're at the movies or you're at a football game or whatever, and you have a thing of popcorn. You eat the whole thing of popcorn. Why is that? You're disinhibited. You're not thinking about it. You can actually measure the HRV value based on that, and it's always going to be lower. How many people here take omega-3 fatty acids? Pretty much everybody, right? Why do we do that? Okay? So the heart has a tremendous amount of omega-3. So besides the fact that it's anti-inflammatory, it's also stabilizing to the heart. And it's been shown in studies that HRV will actually go up when you consume high levels of omega-3 fatty acids. They also showed that you have decreased heart arrhythmias when you consume them. So how do you take this and apply it to yourself? And these are some of the different products you can consume, but what I do, again, in the morning, 5 minutes, sit there, relax, take my baseline. Then I consume the food. So let's take the cheese, for example. And I wear the monitor for about an hour just to see where I'm at. If my HRV goes up, which we would expect because it's a parasympathetic activity, then that food is unlikely to cause you a stress reaction. Now, if your HRV goes down, it's likely that that is a stressful food specifically for you. Again, you have to take this in the context of what you're doing. I wouldn't just trust one reading. I would do at least a week, and then I would repeat it down the road. So this is a little time-consuming up front, but it's, I think, very powerful for you to specifically know what works for you. So just in recap, it's important to address all these different variables that affect your nutrition. You cannot do keto or ketogenic lifestyle in a bubble. So, actionable information from this talk. We all do the blood glucose and ketones. Now we've added the 2-hour postprandial and the heart rate variability. And I think you have a very powerful tool to really kind of titrate what you do and how you apply the keto lifestyle to yourself. And this is kind of what I find the future of medicine, especially for people here. Probably not in the hospital setting, but I think we're going to the direction where we're going to do genetic evaluations, lab data. We're going to use continuous glucose monitors. I know people are working on continuous ketone monitors as well. We use heart rate variability, biohacking to optimize human. So, for those of you who are interested in talking to me or working with me, I do one-on-one coaching with people. My website is mynamemd.com. I know it's very original. What I would say is take away from this conference this information and apply it not only to yourself, but to your children, to your grandchildren, to your friends, because the medical community will be behind you if you guys are behind this. If you go to your doctor with the information and say, look, I want to do keto and this is what the studies show, that's a lot more powerful than saying, what do you think I should do about keto, or should I try keto? Take the power in your hands. I also offer a Keto Doctor program that incorporates a lot of these things I talked about in it, and I do have free virtual office hours on my website. They're free, 15 minutes, sign up, ask me anything. Thank you very much. About 5 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you for that information. So in terms of heart rate variability, there's so many devices on the market. I've looked at many of them myself. I found them all to be lousy. The chest strap is very difficult to wear. So two things we would like from you. One is that what is the software you use to evaluate the heart rate variability?
Okay.
And the next thing is that what is the best device that you can wear, not the chest strap, because that's very difficult. So in your recommendation about the best device that you can offer to us.
I do a lot of running, triathlon, so I haven't really found the heart rate monitor to be a problem, but I guess maybe that's because I use it a lot. I use the Elite HRV as mine, and I've actually found it to be, I know the people who brought the product to the market, and so I've done a lot of the testing with them, and I found it to be pretty accurate. I know they're coming out with products where it's going to be more of a pulse oximeter type, and so that's a good question. I don't think they're there yet. I think that's a very developing market. In terms of nutrition, I think it's maybe starting to come into the foray. It's mostly been used with performance athletes, so I think they're used to all the gear. So I think probably if it becomes something that people enjoy using, they'll start making products that are more accessible. My guess is probably it's going to be a wrist one, but again, the technology, if you're thinking about it, it's trying to work like a pulse oximeter, so it would have to be a monitor that can actually access your blood or the blood vessels. Yeah, so the software I use is the Elite, but there's other ones. There's FirstBeat, and they all kind of work the same way. So I think what I recommend is a lot of them, you don't have to pay for them up front. You can try them out, do a trial, see which one works for you. And a lot of it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're just trying to accomplish a baseline HRV measurement, I actually think the Aura is pretty accurate. If you're looking specifically for nutrition, in my experience, I found the Elite one to be the best.
I've been monitoring my HRV mostly for workouts, like when I'm rested, when I can really push it. On the app that I use, it has the low frequency and high frequency. How important is it to look at the ratio of that to see how balanced the parasympathetic and sympathetic?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's probably a little bit above the level of this conference, but basically what you're trying to look at, I think it's very important. If you're looking at exercise performance, is that what you're looking for? Yeah, I think it's very important because it gives you more data. I also think there's other variables that they look at that are very important. But if you're looking at it specifically for nutrition, I don't think it makes a difference.
So as far as with exercise performance, if my HRV is good but my ratio is off, should I use that also as far as how much I should push then?
I would, yeah.
Okay.
So if it's off, I would probably not push as hard, even if your HRV is showing that you're ready to go.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.